He published an article that ruined an innocent man's life without bothering to check the facts. What he didn't know was that the very man he destroyed would soon become his new boss. Their first meeting changed everything. But let's start from the beginning. Jonathan Hart, a 45-year-old white journalist with neatly styled sandy blonde hair and sharp, determined blue eyes, sat confidently in his office. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and a gray blazer, he leaned back in his ergonomic chair, reviewing the final draft of his latest exposé. The headline was bold and accusatory. Rising Entrepreneur or Calculated Fraud, The Truth About Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams, a 38-year-old black entrepreneur with short-cropped black hair and a determined, serious expression, was known for his innovative tech startup that promised to revolutionize local business logistics. He had built his company from the ground up, often working long hours and investing his personal savings to make it a success. But his world turned upside down when Jonathan's article went live. The piece accused Marcus of embezzling funds from his investors, citing vague anonymous sources who claimed he had funneled money into offshore accounts. Though completely unverified, the article was written with an air of authority, leaving readers with little doubt about its credibility. The sensational claims spread like wildfire across social media, igniting heated debates and tarnishing Marcus's reputation almost instantly. Jonathan basked in the glow of his newfound fame. His colleagues congratulated him for breaking the story, and his editor praised the article's impact. Jonathan, wearing a smug smile, sipped his coffee while watching the engagement metrics on his screen skyrocket. Comments flooded in, ranging from outrage at Marcus to applause for Jonathan's courage in exposing the alleged scam. Meanwhile, Marcus was blindsided by the fallout. Calls and emails from clients poured in, most of them cutting ties or demanding refunds. Investors who had once praised his vision were now withdrawing their support. News outlets began picking up the story, amplifying the accusations, while social media was ablaze with hashtags like #FraudExposed and #CancelMarcusWilliams. Sitting in his sleek, modern office, surrounded by awards and framed certificates celebrating his achievements, Marcus looked visibly shaken. He ran his hand over his face, his dark brown eyes filled with frustration and disbelief. "This is a nightmare," he said, leaning back in his chair as his phone buzzed relentlessly. Determined to fight back, Marcus assembled his legal team. "I need every financial record, every client testimonial, every shred of evidence we have," he told them, his voice steady but resolute. His closest friend and business partner, Angela, a 40-year-old black woman with shoulder-length braids and a calm demeanor, sat across from him in the conference room. "They're going to destroy everything I've worked for," Marcus admitted, his tone heavy with frustration. Angela, dressed in a smart green blazer, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Then let's make sure they can't. We'll prove them wrong, Marcus. You've done nothing but honest work, and we'll show that to the world." Despite the reassurance, Marcus knew the uphill battle he faced. The media frenzy was relentless. TV pundits speculated on his downfall, online trolls launched personal attacks, and even casual acquaintances began to distance themselves. Jonathan, unaware of the storm he had truly unleashed, celebrated his success. He sat at his desk, updating his resume with the headline of his article prominently featured under Achievements. To him, Marcus was just another name in the endless stream of stories, someone whose life he would soon forget, replaced by his next big scoop. For Marcus, however, this wasn't just another article. It was a direct assault on his integrity, his livelihood, and his dreams. He looked out of his office window, the city skyline stretching before him, and clenched his fists. "This isn't over," he whispered to himself. Marcus Williams arrived at the offices of the Daily Sentinel, his sharp black suit and polished leather shoes contrasting with the casual hustle of the newsroom. His short, neatly styled black hair framed his serious face, and his determined brown eyes scanned the room as he was led into the conference area. The minimalist design of the office, with its glass walls, sleek metal furniture, and neutral color palette, gave the space a cold, almost clinical feel. Inside the meeting room, 5 people awaited him, including Jonathan Hart. Jonathan, dressed in a light gray blazer, a white shirt with the top button undone, and dark blue jeans, sat confidently at the head of the table. His sandy blonde hair was meticulously styled, and his posture exuded an air of superiority. Around the table were the editor-in-chief, a gray-haired man in his mid-60s wearing round glasses and a navy sweater, along with 2 staff writers and the legal advisor, all dressed in business casual attire. As Marcus entered, his presence immediately shifted the room's dynamic. At 6'2", he towered over the seated group, carrying himself with a quiet authority. In one hand, he held a sleek black leather briefcase, which he set deliberately on the glass table. Without sitting down, he began. "Your article is riddled with falsehoods," Marcus said, his deep, steady voice filling the room. He opened his briefcase and pulled out neatly organized files, placing them on the table with precision. "Here is proof that every claim you made about my company is baseless. Your article isn't just inaccurate, it's defamatory, and it's ruining my business." Jonathan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His blue eyes narrowed slightly, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We stand by our sources," he replied, his tone dismissive. "This is journalism, Mr. Williams, not a PR campaign." Marcus turned to him, his gaze unwavering. "Journalism requires facts, not rumors," he retorted sharply. "Your so-called sources are anonymous because they don't exist, or because you didn't bother verifying their claims. That's not journalism, it's bias." The editor-in-chief, who had been quietly reviewing the documents Marcus provided, cleared his throat. "Jonathan, let's hear him out," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. He began flipping through the financial reports, client testimonials, and legal statements that Marcus had meticulously prepared. His brows furrowed as he read, and the room grew uncomfortably silent. Jonathan, sensing the shift, leaned forward. "Look," he said, his voice growing defensive. "We're not in the business of taking sides. If you have evidence to the contrary, we'll review it. But my article followed every ethical guideline." "Ethical?" Marcus interjected, his voice rising slightly but still controlled. "You published a story based on unverified accusations without even contacting me for a statement. That's not ethical, it's negligent, and it's destroying my reputation." The legal advisor, a woman in her late 30s with dark brown hair, tied back in a neat bun, interjected cautiously. "Mr. Williams, are you suggesting legal action?" Marcus's lips tightened into a thin line. "I'm not suggesting anything, I'm stating it. My legal team is already preparing a defamation lawsuit against the Daily Sentinel and Mr. Hart personally. Unless this article is retracted and a formal apology issued, we'll proceed." The tension in the room was palpable. Jonathan's confident facade began to crack. He uncrossed his arms and glanced at the editor-in-chief, seeking backup. But the older man was still engrossed in the documents, his expression growing increasingly grim. Marcus took a deep breath, his tone softening but remaining firm. "I didn't come here to fight. I came here to give you the chance to do the right thing. Retract the article. Issue an apology. That's all I'm asking for." The editor finally looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's. "Mr. Williams," he said slowly, "we'll need time to review all this. But I can assure you, if there's any wrongdoing on our part, we'll address it." Marcus nodded curtly, gathering the remaining documents and placing them back into his briefcase. "You have 48 hours, he said before turning to leave. As the door closed behind him, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Jonathan shifted in his chair, muttering, "He's just trying to scare us." The editor-in-chief turned to him, his voice cold. "Jonathan, I suggest you start preparing an explanation, because if he's right, this could cost us more than just a lawsuit." For the first time, Jonathan felt a pang of doubt. His confidence faltered as he realized that Marcus wasn't the easy target he had assumed. The storm brewing outside the office windows mirrored the tension within, signaling that the battle had only just begun. A ripple of shock swept through the newsroom of the Daily Sentinel when the announcement was made. Marcus Williams, the man at the center of a recent controversy, was appointed as the new editor-in-chief. The decision, handed down directly from the company's board of directors, was a calculated move to restore the publication's reputation after the fallout from Jonathan Hart's article. The staff gathered in hushed groups, whispering about what this meant for the future of the paper. On the morning of his first day as editor, Marcus arrived at the office with his signature quiet confidence. He was dressed impeccably in a dark navy suit, tailored to perfection, with a crisp white shirt and a silver tie. His polished black leather shoes echoed against the tiled floors as he walked toward the glass-walled editor's office. His short black hair was neatly styled, and his expression was one of calm determination. Jonathan Hart, seated at his desk in a corner of the open newsroom, watched Marcus's arrival with a mix of emotions. His sandy blonde hair appeared slightly disheveled, and his usually confident demeanor was replaced with visible unease. Dressed in a gray blazer over a light blue shirt, Jonathan stared at Marcus, his blue eyes narrowing. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but there was also a flicker of fear. Fear of what this change might mean for him personally. The newsroom was called to assemble for Marcus's inaugural meeting as editor. The staff gathered in the sleek conference room, its glass walls providing a full view of the bustling newsroom outside. Marcus stood at the head of the long table, his posture straight and his hands resting lightly on the polished wooden surface. "Thank you all for being here," Marcus began, his deep voice steady and clear. "As you've all heard, I've been brought in to lead this publication through a critical moment. Let me be very clear. There will no longer be a place here for unverified information or for biases disguised as journalism. Integrity will be our guiding principle moving forward." His words carried weight, and a palpable tension filled the room. Some staff members nodded in agreement, impressed by his directness, while others exchanged uncertain glances. Jonathan, seated near the back of the room, leaned forward, his arms crossed and his expression defiant. "This isn't how journalism works," Jonathan interrupted, his tone edged with sarcasm. "We're not perfect, but we can't function under constant scrutiny." Marcus turned his gaze to Jonathan, his calm demeanor unwavering. "Journalism," he said firmly, "is about uncovering the truth, not creating narratives to fit a preconceived agenda. If scrutiny is what it takes to ensure that, then so be it." Jonathan's jaw tightened as the room fell silent. The staff watched the exchange with rapt attention, sensing the underlying tension between the two men. Marcus let the silence linger before continuing. "I'm not here to tear anyone down," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I'm here to build this paper into what it should be, a beacon of truth and accountability. But make no mistake, accountability starts here." After the meeting, Jonathan lingered in the newsroom, his mind racing with indignation and uncertainty. His confidence in his own position felt suddenly precarious. Later that afternoon, Marcus called Jonathan into his new office. The space, previously stark and impersonal, now carried Marcus's touch. Framed certificates and awards lined one wall, and a sleek black desk dominated the center of the room. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the dark wooden floors. Jonathan entered hesitantly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his dark blue jeans. Marcus stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the city skyline. He gestured for Jonathan to take a seat. "Jonathan," Marcus began, his tone calm but resolute, "I know you're feeling uneasy about this transition. Let me make one thing clear. I'm not here to seek revenge. That's not who I am. But I will ensure that the kind of carelessness that led to your article never happens again." Jonathan straightened in his chair, his brows furrowing. "You think I'm careless?" he retorted defensively. "I think," Marcus replied, meeting Jonathan's gaze, "you didn't think about the consequences of your actions. For me, for this paper, or for the people who trusted us to tell the truth. That's what needs to change." The two men sat in silence for a moment, the tension between them thick. Finally, Marcus stood and extended his hand. "This isn't about the past, Jonathan. It's about what we do moving forward. Are you ready to be part of that?" Jonathan hesitated, then stood and shook Marcus's hand. "I don't agree with how this happened," he admitted, "but I'll do my job." "Good," Marcus said with a faint smile, "because I expect nothing less than your best." As Jonathan left the office, he couldn't shake the feeling that his world had been irreversibly altered. For Marcus, this was just the beginning of his mission to reshape the publication, and to prove that integrity could triumph over ambition. A month after his appointment, Marcus Williams organized a high-profile event in the Grand Auditorium of the Daily Sentinel's headquarters. The venue, with its sleek modern design of polished steel beams and floor-to-ceiling glass windows, overlooked the bustling city streets below. Rows of chairs were filled with journalists, editors, and staff members, along with a selection of invited media personalities and stakeholders. Cameras from various news outlets lined the back of the room, ready to capture every moment. Marcus, dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit with a deep burgundy tie, stood confidently at the podium under the bright stage lights. His short black hair was neatly styled, and his calm yet commanding presence instantly drew attention. Behind him, a large screen displayed the event's title: The Future of Ethical Journalism, a Commitment to Accountability. As the murmurs of the audience subsided, Marcus began speaking, his rich voice resonating across the auditorium. Today, we mark a new chapter for the Daily Sentinel, a chapter where integrity, fairness, and truth take center stage. Journalism is not just about telling stories, it's about telling the right stories, with respect for the people they affect. He then unveiled the new editorial code of ethics, a comprehensive document that outlined stricter fact-checking protocols, transparent source validation, and accountability measures for errors. The screen behind him displayed key points as he explained each one. The audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others taking notes. Media has immense power, Marcus continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. And with that power comes responsibility. Mistakes, especially those born from bias or negligence, can destroy lives. We owe it to our readers and to ourselves to do better. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as Marcus concluded his presentation. Then, in a move no one expected, he paused and said, "But accountability starts with us, and today it starts with one of our own." He turned toward the audience and said firmly, "Jonathan Hart, please join me on stage." All eyes turned to Jonathan, who was seated toward the middle of the room. He froze for a moment, his face pale, before slowly standing. Dressed in a light gray suit with a navy tie, his usual confidence was noticeably absent. As he walked toward the stage, the murmurs grew louder, a mix of curiosity and tension filling the room. Jonathan climbed the steps and stood next to Marcus, his hands nervously gripping the sides of the podium. The lights reflected off his sandy blonde hair, and he avoided eye contact with the crowd. Marcus stepped aside, giving him the floor. Jonathan took a deep breath, visibly struggling to steady himself. Finally, he spoke. "I made a serious mistake," he began, his voice shaky but audible. "I failed to verify the facts in my article about Marcus Williams. I relied on unverified sources and rumors instead of seeking the truth. In doing so, I hurt not only Marcus, but also the trust our readers place in this publication." His admission hung in the air, heavy with the weight of its implications. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then, gathering his courage, Jonathan continued. "I want to apologize to Marcus, to my colleagues, and to our readers. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I am committed to learning from this and doing better." The audience erupted into applause, some polite, others enthusiastic. Jonathan looked down, his expression a mix of relief and lingering shame. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand to Jonathan. The gesture was simple but profound, symbolizing both forgiveness and a call to move forward. As their hands met, Marcus addressed the audience. "This is what accountability looks like. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about owning up to our mistakes and working to make things right. Today, we take the first step together." The applause grew louder, filling the auditorium with a renewed sense of hope. Staff members exchanged glances, many visibly moved by the moment. Some even stood, clapping in solidarity. After the event, the clip of Jonathan's public apology and Marcus's handshake went viral. Headlines praised Marcus's leadership and Jonathan's courage to admit his faults. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #ethical journalism and #new beginnings. For Marcus, the event cemented his reputation as a transformative leader committed to integrity. For Jonathan, it marked the beginning of a long journey to rebuild his credibility and redefine his approach to journalism. Together, they became a symbol of redemption and progress, showing that even the hardest truths could pave the way for meaningful change.